Welcome to the Danny Carlson Podcast, your resource for growing the business and mindset for a life of unrestricted freedom. Now here's your host, online marketing acrobat, Danny Carlson.
What's up, guys? Danny Carlson here, and this is the Danny Carlson Podcast, and I am super excited for this one. I got introduced to Steve by a friend that I just randomly met at a co-working space, and I had actually read Steve's book probably 3 months previous to this, and then just randomly getting introduced to him through some random person that I met in Bali. That's kind of the magic of Bali. You guys are really going to be interested in this one. And Steve, you've actually spent a little bit of time here in Bali, and you're telling me before we started this podcast recording about some crazy bungee jumping thing and some crazy pool stuff going on there. What is that all about?
Yeah, so I lived in Bangkok in 96, 95 through to about 97, 98, around about that period. And I used to travel a fair bit into other regions around. And I probably visited Bali back in the late 90s, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, especially over Christmas, convincing myself that I would learn how to surf, and it never happened. And just off of Kuta Beach, there was a club. And the club used to have this real dodgy old crane. There was no health and safety involved. And they used to literally just like pull people up to a ramp. And then this thing opened up. Here was the crazy thing. This thing opened up at 12 o'clock at night. So by 12 o'clock at night, everyone's already lashed up. They've already got the beer in them. And then if you wanted to, you could bungee jump from, I think it was like midnight till about 1:30 in the morning. I did it a few times, and every time I did it, I was like, I'm never doing that again. Of course, like 5 nights later, you'd have a few more drinks, and you'd go, yeah, let's go bungee jumping. So you'd do it again. But the amount of times I saw people, they would kind of like rebound a couple of times and then scattergun their insides over everyone by the pool. Wasn't pretty.
I've got such a good visual of someone just spewing puke, just
someone
like a big
it.
spray arc going as they go back up there.
Not nice.
So, Steve, something that you're famous for is solving really, really complex problems. And I just want to start things off here by, someone who has as much experience as you solving just very unique things. What is your process for looking at a new problem to solve? Like, how do you start the process and really break it down? How are you going to solve it?
Well, I ignore it, first of all. You see, 9 times out of 10, the problems that you perceive are your perceived problems. That not the actual real problem, or more importantly, not the core of the objective. It's like you kind of look at a wall and you see a spot on it, and all of a sudden you can see nothing but that spot, and you forget the fact in a couple of weeks' time you're going to be demolishing the house in any case. So whenever anyone comes to me and they say, hey, I want to do this, or I'd like to go and meet this person, or I'd like to go backstage here, or I'd like to do this amazing thing, before they've even gone any further, I'll say to them, hey, that sounds fantastic. Why is that important? I want to know the reasoning behind it. I want to know the core behind it. I want to know what the trigger is that's causing you to see so much value in that you have to do it, that you would come to a person like me and pay quite openly what would be a lot of money to engage my services. So once I know that, then the next step is I never give a client what they asked for. I always give them what they deserved, desired, and dreamt of that they didn't think was possible. So that's my process. First of all, ignore the request and find out the source and the reasoning. And then secondly, to actually go, okay, how can I actually make that more exciting than what they gave me?
So would that be, for example, if someone is like, hey, I want a Ferrari. That's what they tell you, right? But the real reason that they want a Ferrari is to look good to this girl that they like, for example, or something. Is that kind of what you're getting at here?
Absolutely. You know, I've had people say to me before, I'll give you a story if I may. Yeah. I had a client of mine that was introduced to me from a mutual friend, Richard Branson. And he contacted me via Richard because he wanted to meet the rock band Journey. My first introduction to him was, hey, this guy wants to meet Journey. Can you make it happen, Steve? So I contacted the guy and I said, like, hey, how you doing, Steve? Said, blah, what do you want to do? I want to meet the rock band Journey. I want to get backstage and shake their hand. I was like, oh, that sounds fantastic. That sounds brilliant. You don't tell anyone that sounds stupid. You say, oh, that sounds fantastic. That's brilliant. Why is that so important to you? And you get the silence in. You try to slow it down a little bit. And then they go, well, I did this. And as I was talking to him, the true reason came forward. As a young lad, when he was at college, he had no money, like most of us when we're young. And he slept on his mate's couch. The only way he made any money was he was the lead singer of a cover band for Journey. And so he used to go around all these bars and clubs and pubs and stuff singing the Journey tunes. Now, throughout his life, he's been rich, he's been poor, he's been sick, he's been healthy, he's been in relationships, he's been outside of relationships, he's been screwed over, ripped off, spat on, laughed at, humiliated. Now, if this is sounding familiar to anyone, it's called the journey of an entrepreneur. This is what happens. It's called life. If you don't like any of those things, tough, it's coming. But through the ups and downs of his life, he always played Journey tunes to either celebrate his victories or to motivate him in his darkest hours. And I suddenly realized that this was actually his go-to. This was his comfort blanket. This was how he managed to get over certain things. And every success that he's had in his life, he's been able to attribute to a tune. It was that valuable to him. So I said to him, that's fantastic. So they've basically been the theme tune of your life's movie. And he went, yeah. And I said, so the final chapter of that movie, should it be you hanging backstage while they've just sung to 20,000 people, shaking their sweaty hands, and then they've forgotten your name by the time you got to the changing room? Would that make a good ending to the movie? And he was like, oh, no. So I went forward, chatted with Journey, and we ended up putting him live on stage down in San Diego, and he sang 4 tunes with the entire band, and he's deemed as the shortest-term lead singer of the rock band Journey now. So we took what he wanted, found out why he wanted it, and then try to see how far we could actually take it.
That is an incredible story. And if I remember correctly, the reason that you were able to do that is because one of the singers of Journey had a daughter who also had a similar condition. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what I did was, in any conversation, in any communication I have with anyone, I always try to find a win-win. And believe it or not, the win-win will never be money. So when I went to Journey, I had done my homework. My client's brother's son had autism. I discovered through a little bit of Googling that the drummer of Journey, his son was autistic, and he was a great advocate of Autism Speaks. So when I went forward, I said, hey, I want to do this. I've got a super fan. He wants to do this. How would it be if he made not only a donation to Autism Speaks to allow this to happen, but we actually raised awareness by everywhere possible, like shirt pins, having some Autism Speaks, getting some signed guitars and auctioning them off on behalf of autism. We want to get behind raising awareness for Autism Speaks. So they love the idea. It gave them great PR. It made the drummer very happy because we were raising awareness for Autism Speaks. A massive donation was actually paid to Autism Speaks. So it did 2 things. The client got happy, and we raised awareness to a disease that was very much of the heart of one of the members of Journey.
Love the way you think on that one. And one thing that I'm personally really curious about is, what kind of team members do you have that help you out with this? Like, do you have, like, I'm just struggling to think of, like, who is the actual team and what are their roles to go about such diverse problem sets like this?
Yeah, so those if you want to do something in France, first of all, speak to someone in France, or fly to France, or know someone in America that's French. The first steps are very, very, very easy. If you want to go on a 200-mile run, start by running 2 miles. So we have a team that we break it down depending on how long they've been with us and how long they've proved themselves and what they're able to do. It may be me that actually chats with Journey and gets them to say yes, but it'd be one of my legal team to go over the parameters of what images we can use. It'd be one of my logistics team that actually contacts them to find out when they're going to be at stage, what time they're going to be at stage, what time they're going to be doing warm-up, and bring me all of those ingredients to be able to continue doing what I'm doing. So when it's these massive experiential orchestrated experiences that I'm putting together, I have a team that bit mill it to the point that I don't have to worry about the invoice and the logistics. I just turn up knowing that the appropriate chairs are going to be there, the appropriate music's going to be playing, and the security have got the adequate passes for us to get past them.
Yeah, and I'd imagine that everyone on your team and everyone that you work with, they kind of have to be a little bit more open-minded, right? Because a lot of these problems that you're going to solve for your clients, a lot of people would say it's impossible, right? So does that factor into your hiring process or who you choose to work with? People who are just willing to go after these problems that other people would just not even bother going after?
My team, you couldn't picture. I've got punky young 20s girls, and I've got mothers of 3 in Florida. So every single one of them shares a few traits. One of them is that we're all pretty cynical. You say, oh, you can't do that. We're sitting there going, why can't we do that? Why can't that happen to us? What possibly is going to come up that I'm not going to be able to get that museum shut down or get the Pope on the phone? What is possibly going to happen that can't happen? We're cynical, so we reverse attitude the event. And then secondly, we love a challenge. Now, all entrepreneurs, if you want to make an entrepreneur go bankrupt real quick, you turn around and you go, oh, I bet you can't do that for $100. And the entrepreneur will go, yeah, I can, because they'll look at the challenge over the price tag. The cynicism in us allows to look at the effort level. And we have an ROE. We have a return on energy. How much energy have I got to put into this thing to make it work? We are never, because of our cynicism, going to allow us to do it for $100. So we're a lot more focused on making sure it works appropriately for the right amount of retribution, the right amount of income for us, and then we'll put our energy in and put it in. So we've got some cynical, slightly dysfunctional weirdos that work for Bluefish. But then again, they're pretty much the usual entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly takes a certain type of person to even put your hand up to get into some kind of solving problems like that, right?
Yeah.
And one thing here in Bali is a lot of the people and a lot of the listeners of the show they're really into a lot of spiritual kind of practices like manifestation, for example. And I'm not sure if you follow these kind of trains of thought, but between quote unquote manifestation or visualization practices, do you work any of that into your process for coming up with unique solutions to these problems?
Now, my answer off the gut would be no, I do not. Until the people that I've met, and you mentioned Dave Asprey, and we got Vision, and we got Joe Polish, and we got a whole bunch of people that are a lot more into the meditation than I am. In fact, I can say quite openly, I do not meditate. And for many years, I thought that kind of mumbo jumbo should be nowhere near me, until it was made aware to me by Dave and people like that it actually was what I did. I just did it in my way. So the visualization of it actually working, I'm a great believer that you've got to be able to see it working before it can work. There's the classic story of Walt Disney when Walt Disney died and they were just going to open up the Epcot Center. And they spoke to one of the heads at Disney and they said, are you sad that Walt Disney's not here to see it today? And the famous line is that you're only seeing it today because he saw it before you. So I'm a great believer that we do have to visualize what we're going to achieve. Otherwise, we're kind of not focusing on the goalpost, are we?
Right. And, manifestation and all these kind of woo-woo words, they can really turn people off. But I think even the most rational thinker can agree that visualization is a really important step in order to set a goal and actually reach a certain result, right? And in a way, like manifestation theory and visualization is really not a whole lot different if you really think about it.
No, they're not. They're not different at all. And they're actually becoming, and again, I'm a no-neck from East London. I'm literally a whiskey drinking biker. So to stick me on a rug and ask me, can I do a yoga move or something like that? You couldn't be further away from the character that I am until I was introduced to the fact that this is exactly what I did. And I had just come to it through my own process. I believe now in a transactional world where you go on Amazon and you go, I want toilet roll, I want this, I want that, and it's delivered. The one thing that we have to do in order to stay above AI is to dream, create, and vision. We have to go, I want this to happen. And not just to want it to happen, go, okay, what's it going to taste like when I'm there? What's it going to smell like? What am I going to hear? I need to put myself in that moment to quite simply, and we spoke about this earlier about, focusing on the dot on the wall before you realize you're demolishing the house in a couple of days. You've really got to put yourself in that position of where you're going to be in the future to be able to reverse engineer it to make sure you get there appropriately. So I'm a great believer that more than ever, the manifestation and the visualization are imperative in order for us to be able to create.
And there you have it, folks. Accidental Spirituality by Steve. Didn't even know. He's so spiritual, he didn't even know he's spiritual.
That you are so correct. You are so correct. I saw so much point in it. I saw so much purpose in it, but I hadn't had it associated with a woo-woo term until I think it was Aspie that first of all turned around and he said, dude, that's what you do. You are doing it. You may not be cross-legged sitting on a mat, but you are doing exactly that. And I was actually challenged, funny enough, and it's a very funny line of conversation that we're going now. I spent a few days last week with Jason. Oh my God, I wish I knew his last name. And Joe Polish. And Jason actually records music. He's an Australian dude, and he's one of the world's most successful composers for meditation and meditational tunes. And he plays the piano on it. I think it's Jason Campbell. I really hope I'm correct on that. But I was with Joe, and Joe said, "You don't meditate, do you?" And I race motorcycles. And for me, as an entrepreneur, I need to get out of my headspace. So I race motorcycles. I do things in order to release. And he said to me, on your second lap, can you hear the engine? And you can't. You can feel the vibration and you know how the bike's handling. But after the first few corners, you can't hear the engine anymore, which is surprising because race bikes are very, very loud. But you get into a state. You get into a one. You get into an acceptance. So I was introduced very firmly by Joe and Jason last week that it's exactly what I do. And I got my first book last week, courtesy of Jason and Joe, on meditation. And I promised I would start going through it. So who knows, if we have a follow-up podcast next year, maybe I'll be singing Kumbaya and be fully engrossed.
Yeah, you'll have one of these necklaces on here. You're gonna have a big headband.
Yeah, I'm gonna be fully there. I'm gonna be walking around, with my arms and legs crossed all the time.
And so you mentioned racing motorcycles, and I can certainly relate to that because I spent about 10 years of my life racing downhill skateboards, which is on roads, right? Going down really steep roads and racing against other downhill skaters. And I've recently gotten into riding motorcycles because it really translates, like the same skills riding down the roads and picking the lines through the corners translates beautifully to sports motorcycles. And I have a theory that a lot of people like yourself who have gotten into really interesting businesses that most people would think is like really scary to start solving all these problems and everything. I have a theory that adrenaline junkies, the adrenaline seeking side of things really translates well into business and going after really crazy problems like this. What do you think about that?
Oh, someone said to me, an entrepreneur is someone that jumps off the cliff and then makes a parachute on the way down. I believe we are that adrenaline, that constant need for a challenge, because when something goes wrong, and you're correct, I've had this conversation. I live in Los Angeles, so I'm down in Venice Beach and Malibu and all these areas, and I'll pull up on a bike and instantly be able to converse with someone that's a skater, anyone that's surfing, because we share the same mentalities. We're searching for that perfect line, and if you're going around a corner and you're using a lot of body weight and it's sketchy and the back end's starting to step out on you, it's not a clean line. And then when you get a clean line that goes around that corner or through that surf or through that wave, all of a sudden there's like no effort. And it's because you positioned yourself beforehand in order to be able to make that move. That's exactly like entrepreneurism. If you're finding yourself, you're a little bit out of pace and you're kind of doing things a little bit awkwardly and it's not feeling very good and the conversations aren't going very well and the sales not happening, it's because you haven't got your line right. And so I'm a great believer that the skill set that you're talking about, the downhill skater, the surfer, anyone doing any kind of sport, which is pretty solo, then I believe we all share the same commonality of that being transcribed straight over to being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've certainly seen that experience for myself. And I was actually in Malibu riding my longboard down the Malibu canyons there, down Tuna Canyon, down Mulholland, and all those famous motorcycle roads. And it is an absolute blast. If anyone is in LA and looking for a crazy good time, then that's definitely something to do there. And I'm really interested to hear your opinion as well on flow state when it comes to in your business and actually working. Obviously, you get into a really deep flow state when you're racing motorcycles and way leaned over and dragging your knee on the ground. But I'm curious to hear if you get into a similar flow state when you're just like really diving into one of these problems, and if that's a similar feeling to the motorcycles.
100%. It's exact. Very short answer there. It's exactly the same. Do you know, I suppose we should have to ask Dave Aspie about this, but it seems to be the exact same chemical that's released in my head when I'm in the flow state of planning an amazing experience, and it's all going ding, 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 and it's working, as I am kind of taking 4 or 5 corners on a racetrack at 180 mile an hour. The state of mind is exactly the same. The pleasure, I will literally come off a bike and I'll be like, yeah, oh, wow, yeah, that's great, you know. And I'll be all kind of like fulfilled and pumped. And it's the exact same thing when I'm off a computer and I've just written out a structure of some amazing event I'm going to do. And I've got all the agreements and I've got the confirmations and I've sent it off to my team to be able to like just lock it in. I'm like, yeah, damn it, we pulled that off, you know, and I'm all alive. So the state and the flow state and the state of mind are exactly the same.
I love that. I'm certainly addicted to that feeling and not looking to stop doing it anytime soon. Can you give us an example of a problem or a project that you're working on, a recent memory that everything was just clicking and you managed to tap into a flow state like that?
Yeah, and I can take it a little bit further. So I was in Italy and I was in Rome and I got a contact. It's in the book. You probably know the story already. And I had a client contact me and he said, I'm taking my mother-in-law and father-in-law, my future mother-in-law and father-in-law, and my fiance down to Florence. I want to impress them, so I need somewhere really cool to eat. I need a good restaurant. And so I said to him, okay, you know, what's the purpose? Well, you know, I'm a powerful man, and I want them to know that their daughter's, you know, within the right kind of man that's going to look after them, but can open certain doors. And this guy didn't like crowds. So, again, listen to what they ask you, kind of ignore it, find out the reason driving it, and then if you go above what they're actually asking for, you can never fail. You see, I could ask Elvis to come alive tomorrow, okay? And that's obviously not going to happen. But then maybe I could rent his house, and maybe I could get an Elvis tribute guy to turn up. And all of this would be way above if someone just said, I just want to go and have a restaurant with some Elvis music. So try and see how far you can take it. When he said he wanted to eat in Florence, my little mind started racing. I was like, all right, I don't want to do it in a restaurant. Where could I do it? You know, are there palaces? Are there mansions? Are there Tuscan villas? You know, how far can I take this? We ended up actually taking over a museum. And believe it or not, it was my first choice. Because if you're going to have somewhere really cool to eat in Paris, you have it somewhere around or maybe in the Eiffel Tower. Why? Because the Eiffel Tower can't be replicated anywhere. Okay? If you're in America and you're in Washington, you know, have dinner in the White House, because you can only have dinner in the White House in DC. So when following that kind of guideline, I realized that the only place in Florence that couldn't be replicated anywhere else, and that was instantly recognizable as Florence, was the Accademia di Galleria, which houses Michelangelo's David, the most iconic statue in the world. And I thought the idea of us being able to take over an entire museum from 3 o'clock in the afternoon and have dinner for 6 people, it started off as 4, but a bunch of hangers-on and friends got wind that we were doing something sexy and turned up at the last minute. So it was 6 people, had dinner at the feet of Michelangelo's David. Now, me trying to get this to be done, it was clicking. I thought to myself, well, I'm going to try and get the Accademia, and they're going to say no, and then I'm going to have to go to the Pitti Palace, or I'm going to have to go to a villa, or I'm going to have to go to a mansion, or I'm going to have to go to Salvatore Ferragamo's home, which we've used before. But they said yes. The first person, the most outrageous, my moonshot, said, okay. And I'm like, I'd saved myself 2 days of running around trying to find a place. So we got the food, we got the chef, we got the agreement, we got the security, we got a string quartet, and I had about 36 hours left before the event. And I'm like, what can I do to make this better? I know I've only got 36 hours, but what can I do to just kind of like, is there anything I can do? Because I won't say I hadn't been challenged, but everything had gone so smoothly. I hadn't been challenged. And that was kind of like weird. Usually you want to kind of, I hear what you're saying, but let's negotiate it. Let me come over and I'll talk. You want something, but I never got any of that. They were like, okay, yes, great, bingo. And I was like, whoa. So I contacted Andrea Bocelli. And again, because my Rolodex, over the years, I've built up great relationships. And I'm a great believer that my bank account is in direct correlation to the relationships I have. So I never introduce myself direct. I always get someone else to introduce me, just like how you met me, So I got a very famous singer to contact Andrea Bocelli and introduce us. So straight away, I'm talking to Andrea as a credible source. I actually spoke to his wife, Veronica, and he turned up while they were eating pasta and serenaded them. And my clients were like, oh my God, this is Andrea Bocelli coming in and singing to us. 6 people eating pasta, and the iconic Italian maestro is in front of us singing. Now, in the afternoon, he'd popped over at about 4:00 in the afternoon just to do a sound check, okay? We're in the museum. Everything had clicked so smoothly. I had been unchallenged that Andrea's next to me just clearing out his throat while we're at the feet of David. All of a sudden, my entire body went cold. Now, Andrea Bocelli, for any of you that don't know, he's blind, okay? So I actually shuddered. I actually kind of had a shock. I had a physical reaction. And Veronica leaned over to me and she said, are you okay? And I said, I've just realized where I am, what we've pulled off, and who I'm sat next to. Because I hadn't been challenged anywhere along the lines, I hadn't had benchmarks to overcome. Literally that moment, sitting next to him, I started convulsing into a cold sweat. And then I got over it. But yeah, it can really kind of like pump you up when you suddenly do these amazing things. And if you're not challenged along the way, get ready for the cold sweats.
That is certainly an incredible story, and perfect example of getting into a crazy flow state, right? Just everything just flowing so perfectly and getting that real adrenaline kick in the cold sweats.
I don't want to interrupt, but there's something addictive, not to you, when you're in a flow state. When you're talking to someone that's running on all cylinders and they are in tune with everything that's happening and they are engaged, and I'm not on about 100%, I'm on about 400%. These people are in. They are in that state. When you're talking to someone because you want to do something with them, they read that. And that's when you get them getting committed to your state. And that's when it starts becoming easier. I believe that I was so engaged, so turned on by wanting to do it there. I think they got addicted to my dream. They got addicted to the passion that I was bringing. They got addicted to my commitment, my engagement, my flow. And that's why I didn't have any objection, because if someone's coming at you in a chieftain tank, you ain't going to be able to stop it.
That's a really, really interesting insight. Do you consciously try to get yourself into a state like that when you are talking to people and, maybe trying to convince someone of some specific step you need for one of your projects? Or is that something that just happens naturally when you just really get into the zone with a project?
No, it doesn't happen naturally, but it does happen. And the way that you make sure it happens is you don't accept projects that don't potentially put you in that state. So if someone said to me, hey, I'd like to have could you book me a table at TGI Fridays on Thursday night at 7 p.m.? You can't get in a flow state with that. It's bloody TGI Fridays. No one cares. But if there's something like Journey or getting married in the Vatican or going down to see the Titanic or any of the countless amazing experiences that I've done, even my consulting now, even when I'm dealing with entrepreneurs and I'm talking with them on branding and marketing, Focus on the person you're doing business with, not the checkbook. Focus on the challenge. And if you look at that challenge and you go, that could excite me, then that's going to get you into the flow state. And then when you get into that flow state, that's when you go and talk to people, because that's when they have a hard job actually saying no to you.
That is such a smart tactic. I love that. And like, I definitely have reached a lot more flow states in extreme sports, but I have been for the last couple of years and want to continue even more exploring getting into flow states for business and on the projects that I'm on, because there's been certain times in downhill skateboarding where I've reached such a deep flow state. Just the amount of information that your brain can take in at once and process is incredible. Like, I was ripping through the French Alps down this big mountain pass on my longboard, and once I got into such a crazy flow state, I'd be coming into a corner and I could, all at once, I was perceiving some cars that were on the other side of the corner that were coming in. I was aware of the two people right behind me, my peripheral vision, the one rider right in front of me, and also exactly the point where I needed to start slowing down. And all of these things have the complete attention of my brain all at once and are able to process. So applying that to business obviously is a very attractive thing for people to look into. And I know that you have some resources on this. Other than your book, you have an online course platform, right? Do you talk about some of this kind of stuff in that platform?
I do, but I want to go back into your flow state for a few seconds. Have you ever noticed, like I use the example to you, that about the third or fourth corner, I can't hear the engine anymore? When you're in your flow state and you're going around, there's so much information going into your brain that it's almost like you stop thinking and you start responding. Your body is doing everything for you. You're not sitting there going, well, hang on a minute, that tarmac's looking a bit rough there. I better put a bit of pressure down on my left toe just to be able to dig that. You don't have the time to think about what you're going to do. You respond, you react, you're in that flow, and you actually end up just becoming rather than planning. The downside is now far too many people plan rather than do. Okay? If you do something, now here's a prime example, and I know we're both the same, and I know the bloody answer already. How many hundreds of times have you fallen off your longboard?
Very, very many hundreds of times.
Right,
and luckily still here. Yes.
Exactly. So why are you still doing it?
It's for that feeling. It's for that flow state and the adrenaline kick that I'm super addicted to.
And you've also now become educated, because here's what happens. And again, I want to translate this into business for an entrepreneur. When you fall down, whether it be you did a contract wrong, you fell off a longboard, you slipped on a motorcycle by using the wrong tires, whatever you did that caused you to fall down, you learn from. And what tends to happen is minutely, you never make that same mistake. The next mistake you make, the next tumble you make, the next fall you make is slightly different situation. And there's a friend of mine that always said to me that experience comes 2 seconds after you needed it. But that's what we're getting. We're getting the experience. We're getting the education. So anyone out there that's going, well, you know, I'm having a tough time with business, great, because you're the one standing the most to learn at the moment. If I get on a longboard tomorrow, I'm going to fall off. If I get on it the following day, I'll fall off again. If I get on it the following month, I'll probably fall off again. But the byproduct will be, I will be doing more challenging courses. I will be going faster. I will be getting more in tune with the board. And I'm using your examples. The bottom line of it is you can't help getting better when you keep pursuing and pushing through those experiences that some people regard as failings. I regard as education. You learn hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ways to steer your board around a corner better. That's what you did. I learned when I fly off my bike on my tires, I learned that I didn't lean in far enough in a corner. I was on cold tires. I paid attention to what was behind me rather than what was in front of me, and I got out of state. Every time I went down, it was because of my fault, and it doesn't happen in that format again. So I applaud anyone that's trying to do something and failing, because you're getting the most out of the education. And you mentioned to me, did I have resources? When we released the book about 2 years ago, the bottom line of it is I was a really big deal to about 3% of the world. Now, I had 218 clients worldwide, and all of them were millionaires and billionaires. But to anyone else, I was just an ugly fellow in a black T-shirt that turned up on a motorcycle. That was me. Then I got revealed when I did a book. And bottom line of it is, I did the book. I got paid very well for it. I thought, I'm going to write a book that I want. I'm going to get on my pedestal and I'm going to moan about how people communicate, how they pay no attention to relationships, how they don't nurture relationships. I'm going to complain and moan about everything that people do and tell them how I do it to avoid it and how I benefited from it. I thought this book, I'm hopefully going to get a few people to change the way they interact with people to create more of a world I want to live in. So it was a very selfish book. I didn't exactly expect it to become a worldwide, I won't say phenomenon, but definitely a bestseller. It's now in Vietnamese, Korean, Mandarin. It's got released in Thai and Japanese. Actually, I don't think it's released in Japanese yet. Maybe January is Japanese. But we just sold the rights to Russia. So this thing is going all over the world. I'm physically speaking all over the world. I spoke at Thailand earlier this year, Mexico, all over America. In October, I'm in London, Marbella, Spain, New York, and South Virginia, just in October. So I'm speaking all over the place. We decided to basically take the book, take the chapters in it, put it into a video format to give you the reason behind the chapter, and some additional how-to. Knocked out 16 chapters and put it on a course. It's at simsdistillery.com. And that was good. That made us feel good. But we don't like to end things. You know, I mentioned to you earlier, we always like, as entrepreneurs, to go, how can we make that better? How can we tweak that? So we found that, every couple of weeks we put more videos in there. I get a lot of people go, no, you should do another course. Sell that as an additional course. We've probably got 5 courses in one course by now, but I don't care. You commit to me by joining, and I'll commit to you by putting more content in there. So that's been my challenge and my fun at the moment, just building up simsdistillery.com to be a good library for you to be able to communicate, build up relationships, the ROI on relationships, how to get in front of the most powerful people in the world, how to make an impact, how to brand, how to market. It's all in there.
I love that. And certainly the book Bluefishing for me was something that really changed the way I think about, what really is possible and how to look at something that you want to do as how can I actually make this happen rather than discarding it and thinking that's impossible. One example that I give to a lot of people, they ask about podcasting, right? I've done probably around 60 podcast episodes or so. And a lot of people are like, how do you actually get these people to agree to be on your podcast if you're just starting out? You don't have any listeners, you're not famous. But my answer for that is that I have only ever had 2 people ever ask how many listeners I have or ask for some kind of social proof or validation before actually agreeing to come on the podcast. It is way easier to get someone to agree than most people think, but yet most people, they kind of shut themselves down in their brain before they even try, right?
Yeah, you just contacted me through a friend of ours, so you had that validation for a start. We had a couple of cheeky little dialogues backwards and forwards, and I said, yeah. So if I find that I'm not having fun with something, I'm not going to do it. But as far as I'm concerned, it's the end of the evening here in Los Angeles. I've no doubt I'm going to go and crack open a cocktail in a few seconds or a cold beer. And I'm just having a conversation with a young dude in Bali talking about cool shit. So how is that a bad thing?
Totally. And so, yeah, moral of that story is, number one, read the Bluefishing book because it will change the way you think. But maybe think about where in your own life you might be shutting yourself down before you even try, when you're just getting in your own way, when it just would have worked if you actually just did it. Right? Yeah. Super, super powerful stuff. So I want to be respectful of your time here. I know you've got some good cold beer to crack there over in the evening. Yeah. But I want to end with one question here, which is there anything that actually does scare you? What are the fear drivers for Steve Sims? And maybe fear isn't your driver. Maybe it's more on the flip side, like satisfaction. But what is really driving you and everything that you do? And is there is it fear, and is it what is that?
So if you stand on a stage in front of 2,000 people and you shout out, "Hey, run outside those doors. There's a bag there with $1 million in it." How many people out of 2,000 do you think are actually going to get off that seat and run out that door? I'm asking you, what's the percentage of people do you think would run out and try and see if there's a bag out there for $1 million?
I'd reckon it'd be somewhere around 3-4%.
3 or 4? Is that right? Yeah. Bottom line of it is a really small percent, correct?
Yeah.
But now if I walked on stage, walked up to the microphone and I just said one word, fire, how many people would actually leave the audience?
Hopefully everyone, or else it's natural selection.
Yeah, you see, the bottom line of it is that people move on fear. People respond more to fear. I'm a very scared person. I don't like falling off my motorbike. So I practice to get better and better and better. I don't like to get boring, so I try to challenge myself. I don't like to lose creativity, so I try to mingle around with people that are creative, that can challenge me. So I don't want to be the same person that you're talking to today next year. I want to have grown. I want to have tried new things. I wanted to have failed. You know, all of my clients, Elon Musk, Branson, all of these people, they're serial failures, but they don't allow it to define them. They allow it to refine them. So I channel the fear of me being stagnant, the fear of me being boring, the fear of me not growing intellectually, financially, motivationally in the next, forget year, 4 weeks terrifies me. And so I constantly want to try new things. I go on speaking gigs. And one of the beautiful things about speaking gigs is, one, let's be brutally honest here, I get paid really well to speak on stages. The other cool thing, I get to listen to people that I never normally would have ever listened to, and then get to chat with them in the green room backstage. I actually get to turn around to some of the most interesting people and go, why do you do that? How did you do that? That's how I know Dave Asprey and Joe Polish and all these boys, because I've been backstage with them, or I've been in environments where I've gone, why the hell you do? Why the hell are you using bulletproof? Why are you shoving butter in those things? I get to ask these questions of people far, far smarter and sharper than me, and it allows me to grow. So my fear is about being the same person that I am today in a month. It terrifies me that much that I'm not going to allow it, and I am going to push myself to grow, be challenged. And if I fail, I've just learned how not to do it. So that's a growth in my books.
Absolutely love that. And I share basically the same fear. I've realized, I've done a lot of journaling on this in the last 6 months or so. I've realized that the thing that really drives me is fear. It's a very similar fear. I call it rocking chair regret. It is, if I can visualize myself, 70, 80 years old, just sitting in that rocking chair, just thinking back on how I lived my life. And if I'm that person and I'm thinking, I wish I just could have had the guts to do this, or I wish I'd spent more time doing this, or just like, I wish I didn't let this thing stop me from doing this. That drives me insane. That is enough to keep me up at night. And literally since I've been 13 years old, that's been the number one driver for everything that I've ever done. And I think it's all nice and good to talk about, I'm motivated by, gratitude and by serving my customers and like all these things. And sure, that might be true, but for me, certainly, same as you, I am primarily driven by fear, and it is that rocking chair regret.
Good. It's good to have that.
Absolutely. Well, awesome, Steve. This has been an absolutely incredible episode. Super fun for me, too, to talk to people like you and just get inside the mind of someone who has done some truly incredible things. So I really thank you for your time. And if people want to learn more about that course that you mentioned or reach out to you online, where can they do so?
So I'm under Steve D. Sims, S-I-M-S. There's only one M in Sims. So you can find me on Facebook under Steve D. Sims. I'm on Instagram. I've got a Facebook group called An Entrepreneur's Advantage with Steve Sims. But if you go to stevedsims.com, you can find out about where I'm speaking, the course. Simsdistillery.com is a direct link. But you can also on stevedsims.com subscribe to my newsletters. So you'll get, if I write out a PDF, if I do a new video, if I find something encouraging, dangerous, exciting, terrifying, scary, a waste of time, I actually put it into a newsletter and I send it out. So you'll hear my babbles every few weeks if you subscribe at stevedsims.com.
And guys, I certainly recommend you do. Very, very interesting man to dive into his story. You won't regret it. And guys, if you haven't already, go leave me a review on iTunes, on Stitcher. This is a very new podcast here, so I appreciate everyone who has left a review on my other podcasts. But for this one, you might be one of the first handful of people to leave a review. So you're going to be famous. I'm going to screenshot it, and I'm going to send it to my mom. I'm going to frame it and put it up above my desk at the office. It's going to be pretty epic. So really appreciate it, guys. And if you're looking for the show notes, that will be on dannycarlson.co. And until next time, guys, take care.
Thanks for joining us on the Danny Carlson podcast. For resources mentioned in this episode, visit dannycarlson.co.